Fairy Sightings podcast, where we listen to people's fairy encounters. But take heed, we're not talking about winged Tinkerbells here. These are real fairies, real encounters that took people like you and I by surprise. Stay a while and hear their stories. My name is Jo Hickey Hall, and I'm a folklore researcher. Hello everybody and welcome to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast. I'm Jo Hickey Hall and my guest this time is writer and researcher Paul A.T. Wilson. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And it's probably been about a week since I heard your interview on the AP Strange podcast, which first off the bat here, I just want to highly recommend people to go and check out the episode because it was a really fantastic interview.
Thank you. I
And
mean, it was all down to him, really. I just prattled on.
I beg to differ, but I think, the content of what you were discussing it's just quite remarkable. And what we're here to talk about, of course, is the Sandown Clown case.
Hmm.
But the update, which, really grabbed my attention and had me transfixed throughout the interview, was the fact that the girl in question, one of the two children, has come forth. And before we get to the interview, for those who are unfamiliar with this case, here is a reading of the original British UFO Research Association, BUFORA, report from 1978. Ghost or Spaceman, 73. I'm indebted to Leonard Cramp for advising Mr. Y to write to me concerning his own and his daughter's experiences, and to Mr. Y himself for providing me with a very complete dossier of events. Of necessity, these have had to be encapsulated, nevertheless they make interesting reading. Mr. Y has requested anonymity because of his daughter's involvement. Tuesday, 20th of October 1970. Around 7 p.m, Mr. Y was driving from Shanklin to Ryde via Seaview to see a friend. Passing through the village of Brading, he turned right to St. Helens and then became aware of a large, multi-lit aircraft to his right, about halfway between the road and Bembridge Downs. It looked enormous as it flew low over swampy terrain. He stopped the car and watched. The object hovered, apparently aimlessly, over the swampy margins of the River Yar. A wide ring of 7 or more lights could be seen, each of them a large and clearly defined sphere, quotes, like a bright red cherry, end quotes, and interspersed with turquoise and a white light. No sound could be heard. Our witness drove on and the object flew parallel. Once outside St. Helens, it cut across about 300 yards behind him and dropped slowly, meandering above distant hedges, now appearing smaller with the number of red lights reduced to 4, which seemed to rotate slowly. Mr. Y again stopped and this time used his torch to signal for some 10 minutes, during which time the object weaved backwards and forwards without settling. He then continued on to his appointment. When he reached his destination, the red lights were still there, and he left his own rear lights on to face the object. Coming out of the house, his friend could see the thing also, playing hide-and-seek between the treetops. As he continued on to Ryde, the lights were lost to view, and our witness saw them no more. On several subsequent occasions he noticed single balls of red light in the sky which would hang stationary or follow him along as though checking his movements. But on the 1st of March 1972, a considerably more frightening incident occurred. It was between 9 and 10 p.m, and Mr. Y was perched on the cliffside at Compton Bay, having been driven there by an unexpected tidal surge, seemingly caused, in part at least, by some form of droning underwater craft. From his vantage point he observed 2 points of light, yellow and, quotes, peering up at me like the eyes of some horrible sea monster, end quotes. He guessed the eyes were not much more than 40 feet away and were just below the surface of the sea, like a sort of periscope. They disappeared, and as the tide gradually subsided, Mr. Y was able to get back into his car and drive home. At no time did he tell his young daughter of anything he had experienced, but at the beginning of May 1973, when she was 7 years old, she claimed to have a very weird encounter indeed. Sandown Spaceman, or Golf Link's Ghost. Fay, or so we shall call her, was near Lake Common, Sandown, on Tuesday afternoon, about 4 o'clock, with a boy about her own age, when they both heard a weird wailing noise, not unlike an ambulance siren. They followed it across the golf links and through a hedge leading to a swampy meadow adjacent to little-used Sandown Airport. The noise ceased. As they were crossing a wooden footbridge over a narrow brook, a blue-gloved hand appeared from under the bridge and a strange figure emerged. The figure fumbled with a book, dropped it in the water, then splashed about to retrieve it. The two then watched the figure enter a metallic hut, similar to those used on building sites, except that it had no windows. It moved along with a strange hopping motion, with knees raised high. The children wandered off and were over 50 yards away when the figure, which from now on will be referred to as he, reappeared, carrying a black-knobbed microphone with a white flex attached. The wailing noise immediately returned, this time being so loud that the boy was scared and began to run away. The noise ceased and he spoke into the microphone, and although so far off, the children could hear his voice as clearly as though he were right near them. Quotes, "Hello, are you still there?" End quotes, he asked, and in response to what sounded a friendly tone, they ventured close enough to speak to the oddly attired person. He was nearly 7 feet tall and had no neck, for his head appeared to be wedged straight onto his shoulders. He wore a yellow pointed hat, which interlocked with the red collar of a green tunic. A round black knob was affixed to the top of his hat, and wooden antennae were attached either side. The face had triangular markings for eyes, a brown square of a nose, and motionless yellow lips. Other round markings were on his paper white cheeks, and a fringe of red hair fell onto his forehead. Wooden slats protruded from his sleeves and from below his white trousers. His first communication was in writing. He wrote in a notebook, in a large hand, quotes, "Hello, and I am all colours. Sam." End quotes. The boy was hesitant, but Fay read each word as it was pointed to. This was necessary as the words were not laid out in conventional sequence. The children ventured closer and discovered that the creature could talk without the aid of a microphone, though his lips did not move and speech was unclear, rather like that of a person who does not open his mouth properly. He asked the children about themselves, so they ventured to ask questions too. They asked about his clothes, which were all ripped, and he told them he only had one set, so he could only wear those. Because of his strange white features, they asked if he really was a man. The answer was a chuckled, quotes, "No." They also asked if he was a ghost. The vague reply was, quotes, "Well, not really, but I am in an odd sort of way." "What are you then?" they continued. But only obtained the answer, "You know," with no further explanation. He also said he had no name. There were others like himself, though, and he drew a rough sketch of one of them. He also confided that he was frightened of people and scared they might hurt him. Apparently, if attacked, he would not fight back. At his invitation, the children crawled through a flap into his hut, which contained 2 levels. The lower had plenty of headroom and was wallpapered in blue-green and covered with a pattern of dials. It also had an electric heater, and simple wooden furniture. The upper level was less spacious and the floor was metallic. He told the children that he fed upon berries which he collected in the late afternoon. He didn't say where, but did indicate that he had a camp on the mainland that he could go to. He also said that the water from the river could be drunk once he had cleaned it. Once inside the hut, he removed his hat to reveal round white ears and sparse brown hair. Before eating a berry, he performed an odd conjuring trick. He placed a berry in his ear, thrust his head forward and caused the berry to disappear and reappear at one of his odd eyes. Repeating the process, the berry travelled to his mouth. Mr. Oliver suggests a possible explanation could be that he was wearing some kind of protective mask and analysing the berry to check it wasn't poisonous. The children talked to this strange being for half an hour or more. Then, after saying goodbye, they rushed across the golf links to tell the first man they'd met that they'd seen a ghost. He merely laughed, but the children were convinced of their experience, and that the being was either a ghost or someone dressed up. Fay told her father of her experience some 3 weeks later on 2nd of June 1973. At first he found the story quite unbelievable, but was amazed at the detailed account and Fay's certainty as to its truth. She was quite upset when he suggested she'd made it up or invented it. Mr. Y saw the boy, but found him not easy to communicate with, though he did get a statement from him verifying he'd seen it too. Apart from make-believe, other possibilities considered included a shared hallucination and a deliberate hoax by someone. There was such an extraordinary amount of detail, however, which included the further point that the creature clearly had only 3 fingers on each blue-gloved hand and 3 toes on his bare white feet, making a deliberate hoax somewhat difficult, and indeed why go to all that trouble? Mr. Y tells me that although bizarre, certain elements of the story rang true to him, and he also took account of the possibility of some connection with his own previous experiences. Summing up, he says, quotes, "I get the impression that Fay was somehow taken into a bubble of alien reality created by this strange personage." He told them he had just made the hut. Also, Fay told me that while they were talking to this ghost, 2 workmen nearby were repairing a post. They paid no attention to the weird charade, as though they could not see it. Well, ghost, spaceman, imagination, hoax or hallucination, take your pick. Just a child's make-believe? Perhaps, but there are a number of unusual elements in the story, and it is very detailed. Remember too that quite a percentage of reports of sightings come from children. The Welsh flap is a case in point, in particular the box dropping incident and the humanoid report from Broadhaven. One last point. Mr. Y visited the spot, but could find no metal hut anywhere in sight, nor any indication of one. Not really surprising, no matter in what light one views the children's story, for, to make a comparison, how often are traces found in reported UFO landings? The case rests.
Yeah, it's one of the strangest, most odd sort of stories that I've ever heard in my life, to be honest. But yeah, it sort of ticks all the weird boxes, you know, and it harkens back to you know, folkloric sort of fairy tale stories, which I think is one of the reasons that people have kind of latched onto it and seen it as a very, very odd thing indeed. Because you know, it's not like a close encounter or a classic sort of close encounter with an alien or you know, unidentified flying object or a ghost or a monster or anything like that. It hasn't, but it has that otherworldly weird weirdness to it.
Mm. Well, this is why, it really grabbed my attention because detail after detail was aligning with the kinds of experiences or kinds of phenomena related to the experiences that people come on to this podcast to talk about. And while you say that it's just a very strange kind of case, it had so much resonance with other cases and that have been talked about on this show. So, we'll get into that. But I think what is really amazing is that it was reported at all because as as it happened, the only reason that we get to hear about it was because her father, Fay's father, and Fay is obviously a pseudonym. Fay's father had had a series of incidents that look as if they'd taken place over about 18 months, partway through 1970 until 1972. And, you know, this was already on his radar, this strangeness of the world.
Mm,
And his experience of that was one that was kind of, acceptable to him in terms of his own, thoughts on what was possible. And then his daughter eventually, I think 3 weeks after the incident, tells her father about what's happened. And
that's right. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so first of all, in a lot of the cases that we hear on Modern Fairy Sightings podcast, there is this link through the generations. It's very common for somebody to have had some kind of experience with an otherworldly being and then to report that either their parent or their grandparent or both or their kids
Mm.
have also had experiences.
Yeah. I mean, it's this sort of multi-generational uh, encounters. Yeah, as you say, can be quite common. I wouldn't say it happens all the time or every single time, but yes, it's not uncommon for this sort of thing to happen. Um, and you look back at reports of experiences with um, demons or elves or you know the fairy folk or and you see that as a recurring theme. It seems to be a multi-generational thing, and you even come to the modern what I believe is kind of the modern version of that sort of thing. UFO encounters and abductions seems to be a multi-generational thing. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the only reason we heard about this story is because her father was amenable to the idea. And in the documents that I have, I've got correspondence between her father um, and BUFORA and other people, and he always sort of preface it all by saying, this could be other things. That there could be other explanations for this. So it's never just him regurgitating and saying, absolutely, this is, I can be 100% sure about um, this story. But he then also goes on to say that his daughter's not one for lying to him and things like that. And so yeah, it's we're lucky to have it at all because it's such, as I said, it's such an unusual story,
Yeah.
an unusual encounter that um, a parent may just dismiss it as a flight of fancy or whatever. But also the time that it happened, the time period was sort of um, uh, was right for that sort of thing as well. There was a lot of uh, people who were open to hearing um, incredible stories and things that, and there was an appetite for those things that may not necessarily easily be explained and so on. So I think it was a perfect storm in this case.
Yeah, I agree. The 70s. I mean, I was born in the 70s, and I can attest to, those times, and the kind of, yeah, we did have an appetite for leaning into otherworld mystery, and yeah, we were much more kind of curious about the universe in that respect. On the timing, also, I couldn't help but notice that the when it took place, at least what it says in BUFORA was early May, which is around Beltane, and well, not just in the folklore, but just in general, people's experiences. That this is a time, if we're going to look at it as a fairy, and for the purpose of this research, I tend to kind of bracket these sorts of experiences potentially in with fairy. The fact that they chose the pseudonym Fay is extremely interesting. Uh, it makes me wonder what BUFORA knew, or as these things happen, and these things always do happen, the coincidence just slips right in. It just those synchronicities are abound with these kinds of cases. But it did happen at Beltane when fairies are supposed to, move across the land. This is when you're much more likely Beltane and Samhain. That's May Day, Beltane and Samhain. As Halloween. These are the times when the other worlds are much more alive. Was that correct that it happened at the beginning of May?
Yeah, so it, it happened sort of around late April, beginning of May. Um, I try not to give, because I have the exact dates, but I try not to give those out. But there's various things I try not to give out, not because I'm trying to gatekeep the information, but um, I'm very much aware that Faye has entrusted me with information, and under the promise that she won't be identified if she, so certain things like actual dates and um, the school she went to and things like that. I kind of keep all that separate. But yes, you're in the ballpark. Yes, very close.
And I completely respect that too. It's something that we do, that I do with my research, is protect locations. And we're not just talking about protecting the people involved, but we're also talking about protecting the location itself and these beings. They have a right for to be protected too. And I this is a big reason why we're talking tonight, that you just kind of spoken about there, is that Faye had contacted you out of the blue. Could you just talk a little about how that came about?
Uh, it's a little bit tricky without giving away too much information, but I wasn't contacted directly by her. It was by one of her children who had contacted me. And when they contacted me, I thought it was about a completely different thing. So I'm quite well known for collecting stories and folklore and family information, sort of family data and so forth from various families on the Isle of Wight and things like that. So I thought it was about something completely different when they contacted me, and they said, no, 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 it's not about that. It's about the Sandown Clown, because they had heard that I had spent many years sort of digging around and trying to find information, and although at the time it was very sparse. There was one document out there that everyone uses as a reference, which is the BUFORA article. And they said that my mother is the girl and would like to speak to you. And I thought, yeah, I've heard this before. Right? Over the years, I've met 3 or 4 Fays, and but each time you never know, right? Now, I want to preface this as I always do. It could be an elaborate hoax, right? The person I met may not have been the person who they claim to be. However, out of all of the people that I've met, she was the only one that had actual hard evidence. A box full of documents, handwritten documents, correspondence, things that I had never seen before, or even knew existed for that matter. And so I tend to feel like this person may actually be who they say they are. But it could be that next week someone will come out and say, no, that's not Fay, I'm Fay. And here's all this evidence. That could happen. But as I said, out of everyone that I had met over the years, and I've met, as I said, 3 or 4 who claimed to be Fay, this person had a lot of evidence that backed up what they had to say. But at this point, I didn't know, and I went to meet her, and again, I'm not going to say where she is, but I went to meet her, and we sat down and we started talking, and I think we've been talking for about 20 minutes, and I said, look, I'll be honest. I've met people before, and this is when she said, well, just hold on a second. And she came with this box, brought this box out and just took this stuff out, and it was just incredible. And she let me take copies of it all. So I had to rush back home, grab my printer scanner thing, because she wouldn't let me take them with me.
Yeah, of course.
So I had to rush back home, grab this scanner and printer thing, and it's big. I don't know if you can see it in the background. It's sort of sitting behind me. Hang on, you see that thing there, right there?
Yeah.
Right, that I had to pick that up and take that with me. Yeah, and she let me scan it all. And there were drawings, original drawings, not just reproductions. And all the drawings that were that have been out there are the ones, again, in the BUFORA magazine. But these were drawings by her when she was a child, by who the boy who went by the name of Jack. That wasn't his name, but that's during the correspondence, that's what he was referred to as.
Another fairy name. I mean, that's another fairy folktale name.
Yeah. And so I had drawings that they had drawn at the time, and then she had a tape, and she played the tape for me, and the tape was their original transcripts, their original interviews that they'd had. There's there were letters to and from the MOD UFO desk, There were reports from there. There is all sorts of stuff. So again, if she was hoaxing me, if it was a hoax, then I applaud her, because put a lot of time and effort into doing that. But yeah, and then we spoke for a few hours. She let me record it all, um, uh, with the proviso that I wouldn't release the audio, but I
Yeah.
could use the audio to transcribe. I could transcribe the audio, and which I have done, um, only recently, actually. It sort of this audio recording is sat for a very long time because I just haven't been able to sit down and type it all out. But now we have things that'll just take the audio and transcribe it for me, so that's all done.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Um, but yeah, it's been uh, you know, absolutely fascinating, because this is a story that I've known about since I was probably uh, 7 years old. So my father, so 1979, something like that. We used to we come back and forwards to the island. I was born here, but um, we'd moved away and we'd come back, and my great grandmother and grandmother lived on the island. We'd come back and see them. Um, that's a whole other weird story. But um, and we went for a walk, and yeah, we walked through Sandown golf course, where he told me the story, um, and it freaked me the hell out. It was something I was not ready for at all. But it has um, sort of been part of my life ever since. It's something that I have been fascinated with it since, as I said, the 70s, really. You know,
Yeah.
um, and being able to come full circle. I mean, I always think, it's so sad that my dad, who loved this sort of stuff as well, passed away, and never got a chance to read this stuff, because I know he would have been absolutely fascinated. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a shame. I totally feel you there. I think I'm the same. The things that, I'm looking at now, I'd love to share with my dad too. And I like to think they're there, kind of just loving what we're doing anyway, and cheering us on from the other side, maybe pointing us in a few directions. And but yeah, that's lovely. And he, as you say, was interested in all of this, which is how he had heard of it too. He had been keeping an eye on.
Yeah, well, he had a subscription to BUFORA,
Mm.
so he'd read it in BUFORA, um, and yeah, that's I think that's where he first sort of came across it, really,
Yeah.
and then shared it with me.
So now the exciting part of this is that Faye had further interactions with this being, and that blew my mind, to be honest, to hear that.
Mm,
And I want to get into that, but before we do, I just want to go through some of the details of the original encounter. And I know that
hmm
some of the details in the BUFORA report were perhaps not accurate. Can you describe um, Can you describe, that please? Because I know at least one of those was the that he was kind of talking into a microphone that then turned out to be a kind of misinterpretation of what had actually.
Yeah.
Mm.
Uh, so the first encounter, well then, so well, when they first meet Sam, he sort of comes out and comes out with his microphone, and it's like a little speaker box thing. And um, in the article, it talks about using it to get their attention. And yes, that is correct, but it's a little bit more than that. So it was kind of so the way that Fay described it to me was that it wasn't audio as so much something that it, it wasn't like a loudspeaker, but it was something that they could hear inside their heads.
They received it.
Yeah, but it was still, they could hear it with their ears, but it was like he was right in front of you. So, with a speaker, right? So loudspeaker, that it is an amplification. Whereas this felt, the way she described, is far more a targeted thing that was almost there in their ears.
Yeah.
So, so it wasn't a loudspeaker that everyone would have heard at varying pitches and things, depending on where you are. It was more something that traveled and landed in your ears, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Was she happy with the report? Having read it herself now, is she happy with how described?
She didn't. I didn't ask her specifically that, but it wasn't like she said it was a hatchet job or anything like that. So I don't imagine that she was, particularly upset about it or anything like that. All I can say is that she was, yeah, she wasn't saying that it was. Yeah, I don't think she classed it as being wrong, but that there was editorializing going on, as you can imagine, right? So the original account that was sent had details that just didn't make the cut.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So so the original account, the original description, or the original letter, was a handwritten note, and then there was a series of backwards and forwards until finally the father sat down and actually wrote what he said, what he called, what he titled Beyond Belief. So he'd taken, and then that account, which was typed up, was then sent, and the editor then edited it and made it a little bit more coherent in certain ways, and so it'd fit the magazine. So Mr. Oliver did that.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, it's not the first thing. It's not the first account. There was another one that father, we'll call him Mr. Y. He goes by Mr. Y.
Yeah.
Had shared the account with another magazine called Official UFO, and that was in March 1977, which is a US publication. So there was another account of this, which I fortunately have a copy of, which was given to me again by Fay, because you just can't find it anywhere.
Okay.
And it's by no means as detailed as the account that we get in BUFORA. And the father's encounters, again, there's more encounters that the father had than were put in BUFORA as well.
Yeah.
Because what we ended up with in BUFORA was an amalgamation of his experiences as well as Fay's experiences. So you ended up with being condensed in all those cases.
Oh, that's interesting because one thing I was wondering about was whether Befora knew about her subsequent experiences, which they wouldn't have done at that point, but did she,
No,
so they were never alerted to those?
no, she never reported them. No, no, no.
And what about her dad? Did she discuss them with her dad, the later ones?
Yes, yeah, yes, she did. In fact, her father, and she said her father had a few more experiences, um, right up until the right up until around about I think 2005 when he died.
Right. So he continued to have what kinds of experiences did he have later?
More traditional UFO type sightings than phase sightings, um, and the way that Fay described them is they became more metaphysical
Mm.
as time went by, um, being a more, you know, uh, rather than sort of face to face encounters. Um, so, and again, I have all those written down. I haven't shared them,
Mhm. Mhm.
but I have those accounts as well. Um, and it's kind of difficult at the moment because I'm still trying to work out how to go through them without giving away
Mhm.
where they lived, and because certainly with her fathers, they're very rooted in their house
Mm.
and where they lived.
It's a small island. It's it's
Mm.
people know. I know what that's like having grown up on Jersey, lived in Jersey most.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, but yeah. So as I said, there are more. There is another um, document, well, another um, version of this that was in the public domain, but it is far shorter, and it's literally one, two, three, four, five, six paragraphs,
Okay.
as opposed to you know um, uh, what we get in BUFORA. But again, BUFORA is cut down because the story that the account that he had written was, let me have a look here. Oh gosh, sorry, getting there. It's sort of I'm scrolling through reams of stuff at the moment, so bear with me.
No.
Um, uh, where is it? Um, his account was nearly 2,000 words. So so you can see there's a big difference between the first account that went out, his account, and the account that went in with uh, BUFORA.
Yeah. Are you able to tell us anything of the detail that was left out of the Befora?
Yeah. So some really interesting little tidbits that didn't make it in, which I think were absolutely fascinating. So uh, in BUFORA, they talk about how Sam had a book that he was writing in and drawing in, and he dropped it in the water, in the stream, and was trying to fish it out. And in the account, um, Sam gave the book to Fay at the end of the encounter, and Fay took it home, and she showed me the book, um, the the notebook that Sam had been using.
Oh, wow.
Um,
What's that like to see that? To hold, presumably to hold it,
it
I'm not sure.
yeah, it was very strange. It was just a normal notebook, an old-fashioned sort of notebook with a ring
Yeah.
thing at the top, right?
The
But
spiral.
it, yeah, but it was old. It was water damaged. You could see it was water damaged. There was writing in it. There was some drawings in it,
Mm.
and these were not drawings that a child had drawn. These were, these were more um, sophisticated drawings and weird doodles and things in there. It wasn't filled to the brim. It was several pages, and it kind of it stopped at the point where Sam had been writing messages to them, um, to sort of tell them things, and he wrote in such a way that the words were all disjointed. And Faye said he had to point to the words so you got them in the right order because you couldn't read them, um, the way. And I saw that, and it was very, very strange indeed.
Amazing.
Again, as I said, if the if Faye had been perpetrating a a hoax, then I'm happy to have been fooled because it's amazing,
Yeah,
right?
it would have come
Um,
to
and she kept it as it was. There was no other writing in it at all. Um, but you can see that it had been water damage. You can see smudges in there, and I know it wasn't done by her father because I have her father's handwriting.
wow.
I have the handwritten accounts and correspondence, and it is nothing like. And her father wrote. You can tell he wrote in fountain pen. Every one of the account, every bit of correspondence, and every bit of handwritten account was written with a fountain pen. What Faye showed me looked like it was written in biro, and it was a different hand altogether. And it was very, very weird,
Yeah.
very strange indeed.
What did the doodles look like? Did you have a sense of the shapes or patterns or
Yeah, so they were almost like inter interpretive art, or impressionist art type things. So uh, there were sort of crude sketches of trees and rocks and things like that, but just a bit odd. Um, uh, Almost like, I don't want to say cubist, but
mm.
certainly blocky, um, uh, and very flat.
Oh,
The thing I would tell you is, it was very flat. There was no shading or anything like that. They were doodles,
yeah.
um, and lots of. The thing I remember was it was almost like start with drawing a five-sided star, and then just keep going, and they all sort of link together and almost became a pattern of sorts. Or they'd start with spirograph. That's what I'm trying to think. Do you remember the spirograph stuff?
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of like that,
Mm.
but not done with anything, just freehand. That's what I was trying to get to. That's what everything kind of looked like.
Amazing. It
So
makes me think of the kind of psychedelic patterns that some people, if they've had kind of, DMT and they describe
yeah,
psychedelic patterns that they experience.
yeah. which is interesting because a lot, yeah, a lot of people report sort of geometric shapes, and although these weren't geometric as such,
Mm.
in that they were freehand, but you could see there was that sort of structure to it. It's very, very difficult to explain. She wouldn't let me take copies of that,
Yeah.
so I was not allowed to take copies of that book.
I'm with her there, and the feeling I get, and I this is something I was really keen to ask you. Does she feel protective of him?
You see, this is it's a really interesting question because I said, look, how do you feel? Because
Oh,
we so when I met up with her, this was pre-COVID, j- just before COVID,
yeah,
really. And I think it was also before the Sandown Clown phenomenon had really picked up. Every so often, people picked up on it as a very strange little thing, and you'd see like little YouTube videos or a podcast would talk about it, or someone would pick it up and write an article and so on. So, but there was not a huge, there was not this deep interest. And I asked her how she felt about it, how she felt about people looking into this, and she said she 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 has no issue with people telling these stories and being and um, being fascinated by it because that doesn't take away from her own experiences. Um, and but does she feel protective or of Sam? I don't know. It's a really good question. I couldn't. I didn't ask her that specifically. So not real good at reading people's minds on things like that because I didn't think to ask that. I mean, it's a really great question. I wish I had.
just the way that maybe the following reports didn't get reported to BUFORA, but yeah, there's just a sense of it, and the other, tying into that, I wondered whether she had a sense of familiarity. Was there a sense of familiarity when she came into contact with him?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 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 I mean, it was, there was never a time where she felt afraid or anything like that. There was this, she spoke about it with warmth and affection and as well as fascination. Um, so, I mean, the way she spoke about it was, as a real person or a real entity or a real thing. Um, so, what, so it's, um, and as I said, yeah, it was real warmth and affection the way she spoke about it. It wasn't like it was um, anything negative. Um, almost matter of fact,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
way she spoke about it. Um, and like there was not, you know, when I say matter of fact, it was like this happened. It wasn't a wondrous thing.
Mm.
It's just these things that happened. And the other thing that I found really interesting about it, about her, about these stories, is neither her nor her father tried to capitalize on any of this.
Yeah.
And that's why I always found it really fascinating. And this is something that occurred to me a very, very long time ago, even before I'd had the chance to meet those. They didn't want to capitalize, or they didn't appear to be capitalizing on any of it. Her father just wanted the story out there so people knew it. And this again was the difference between the Fay that I met and the others.
Yeah.
She again didn't want to capitalize on it. She was very, um, very uh, not militant, but very very guarded about her anonymity. She wanted that, absolutely didn't want that. Didn't look for a penny. Didn't ask for anything from me. Whereas the others were very keen um, to publicize, and and it felt
Off.
more than, it felt less than it was. Um, and so, I mean, I have their encounters, and the storytelling is very different. As I said, the way Fay spoke about it, as I said, very matter of factly, very, these are the things that happened, um, with a warmth and affection. Whereas the others, it was very, um, other, very, oh, these amazing things, it changed my life forever, and it did this and it did that. And they all of them concentrated on what we knew,
Yeah.
what was in and elaborated on that. One of them, it became increasingly more fantastical, but less interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas the encounter with who we're calling Faye, that I had, the last Faye, was very, by no means mundane. When I say that, it was matter of fact, I don't mean mundane at all. It is very fantastical. It is these strange and wonderful stories, but there was just something riveting about it all.
Yeah. On the name also, did did Mr. Wilson from BUFORA, did he choose the name Fay, names Fay and Jack, or did somebody else?
Oh, you mean Mr. Oliver, you mean?
Mr. Oliver, sorry.
Yeah. No, um, that was, Faye's father came up with those names.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but I'm not sure if you mentioned this detail, but they first came into contact with him as they crossed a bridge. Now,
It's, well,
is
as they walked up a path and came to a bridge. Yeah.
so it was like a footbridge rather than a
Yes.
big old bridge. To a footbridge. Now, I was also looking at the area. It's called Lake,
Hmm.
and I believe that it was named due to the Old English lac, which is to do with, it's either refers to a creek, or it can refer to a lake or a creek or a stream. So that
Hmm.
area was a very marshy area.
Yeah. So yeah. So Lake's an interesting place. Where Lake is now is not where the village of Lake was. Um, in that, well, that part of Lake, the original village, is still there,
Mm.
but it's very much, and the old green is there, but no, unless you know the area, you wouldn't know where it is. And there's a sacred well there, and a stream that sort of runs through there, and things like that. What people think of as Lake now is where the sort of the main road went through. But that wasn't Lake Village. Just became Lake Village as
More
it
people.
sort of got built out, and the surrounding farmland got turned into housing. Uh, the golf course is surrounded by sort of marshland, and um, uh, there's creeks and things, and streams that run all through there. So yeah.
So it's watery ground, and what tends to
Hmm.
happen, rather the lot of the descriptions of the encounters that come in to me with my guests on this podcast is that experiences tend to happen around liminal places, and those liminal places include kind of whether it's actual locations like, bridges, or where the sea meets the land, or where you've got kind of marshy land. I mean, just actually, in fact, I was thinking about that the Willerton gnomes, their encounter
Hmm.
with those children, that took place on the lowest part of the park in marshy land, and the beings kind of emanated from around the trees, and the trees themselves kind of grew out of this marshy land. So, and it just recently on the podcast, I spoke to a guy called Sean in Northwest Wales, and he related an experience that happened when this being appeared and approached two men who were out hiking, in marshy land. So these experiences have been known to take place in locations like that. So we've got the kind of liminality of it being Beltane. We've got the bridge itself, which, I mean, that detail comes out in fairy tales too, about crossing the bridge from one place to another. You're just about to cross from one spot to another. You've got the troll stories, and bridges come up in other tales too. And this blue
Yeah.
hand comes out from under the bridge. I mean, I think that's kind of like the creepiest detail, and of course it makes you think of it, or something really creepy emerging from the depths. And just
Yeah.
on that as well, in terms of clowns, does she herself feel that he was a clown? It's been given this name.
No. So that was kind of given as part of the account, but no, she never referred to Sam as a clown. She doesn't refer to him as a clown. Um, she referred to Sam as all color Sam, or a ghost. So the clown, yeah, I don't. She didn't say that she didn't like the name, but she never referred to him as a clown.
Mm. This name, All Colour Sam, got me thinking about. I mean, it might just really sound out there to people that are not into things like this, but uh, if we think about the resonance of colours, if we look to white, and of course, white contains all colours. And when you're looking at kind of energetic systems within ourselves, looking at chakras, once you get to white, white is at the top of the head, it's above the crown. So you come from red at the bottom, which has the densest resonance, and you come all the way up through orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and then white is at the top because white contains all the colors. And there's this sense of, the white light, it comes from the all. And it really made me think of, it really kind of gave a sense that, he was from the all, he was from source somehow. Um, and yet some of the details make him sound kind of very earthy too. He's eating berries. He's later on, which we'll get to. There's the description of him of the smell of leaves and earth when he arrives into one of the visits. So, but there's just something, that all color salmon. We can't know what that is, but that's what it meant to me, and it
Mm.
means something to each of us.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken a very uh, um, I guess liberal view on the whole thing. I'm very interested in the stories and the um, the recounting of those stories, and I'm quite often asked, do you think it's true?
Mm.
Do you think it's real? And in my talk, um, I say, doesn't matter, right? And I think it's what you want it to be. You know, it's a it's it's like all these things. It's what the meaning that you draw from it,
Mm.
um, that's important. Um, and I've always said, with all these sorts of things, either it's all real or none of it's real, right? So, and I choose to believe that it's all real, right? You know, I'd prefer to live in a world of spells and magic and gods and goddesses and monsters and devils and saints and sinners, you know, than in a world without them.
No, yeah, for
Um, and so it's what you draw from it. And the wonderful thing about Sam is, you know, so many people draw so many things from it. You know, the LGBTQ community have latched on and um, you know, see Sam as an icon. The trans community sees Sam as a representation of, you know, transformation and the um, you know, the asexual androgynous sort of community sees Sam as a, you know, non-binary, no, you know, asexual creature again, which I think is just amazingly beautiful,
mm.
as well as, you know, so many other communities that have sort of latched on and seen this as a, you know, a story and a creature that speaks to them in so many different ways.
I really love also that it landed with you, because, you know, you sound like you are an open person. You're from the Isle of Wight, you know, it's you know this place, and I'm sure for Fay it felt helpful to be able to tell this to you. And it didn't escape my notice that this was around the beginning, just before COVID. And I've spoken about this many times. Many of us researchers in this field, of kind of otherworld phenomena and encounters, were called to step into this work, as it were, around that time. Usually by things that kind of begun in around 2016, but for me, I started doing this podcast in 2020, although I'd started the project itself, on Facebook, you know, some years before. And I know it's the same for other people. So to hear that for you also, you know, you were called in to deal with this case, if you like, in that time, also kind of piqued my interest. And, you know, in terms of meaning, I always feel like the most important thing, whether people believe any of this or not, and you're right, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't really matter what other people think either. Mostly it's important for that person who had the experience, because it's their experience, and they, you know, they can make sense of it in any way that feels right to them, and it will be right. There's you know, there's nothing wrong. It's more like how it felt to them and the meaning that it brought them. And I think that that's always the most important thing, in these experiences, is what it meant to them. So just before we then get on to the subsequent visits that she had with Sam, one of the details in the BUFORA report, kind of had me scratching my head, was that they had crawled through a flap to get into the hut.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes.
Wasn't a door as such. Could you describe that?
Yeah. So I asked about this, and the way Faye described it was that it was like almost like a giant cat flap type thing, um, that they had to crawl through, but Sam didn't.
Okay.
And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, I don't know, because Sam was already there. He led them to the flat, and then when they're through, he's there.
You pass through somehow.
It wasn't even described as Sam passing through anything. He was just there.
Yeah, wow.
So I don't know what it was, or why it was the way it was.
Right.
But yeah, she described it as like a giant cat flap type thing.
Mm. Oh, yeah, okay, fascinating. And actually, shall we go to what her dad experienced first? Because that kind of frames the story in effect. What had happened
Yeah.
to her,
So,
her father?
her father had several encounters. Um, so he, and without going into great detail, um, he had an experience where he saw a ring of red lights, and he sort of uh, around a different part of the island, which is a place called Newchurch. Well, Winford is actually um, uh, where it happened, and this happened in 1970. And so he's given the exact date of that, um, and this I don't mind too much giving, because it actually tallies up with someone else who saw the same thing. So this was on the 20th of October in 1970. Um, uh, so he says he was taking some paperwork to his typist, who lived in Shanklin, which is sort of down from Lake. Um, and again, I can't go into what he did, because if I tell you what he did, it'd be so easy to pinpoint who this person was.
Yeah.
Um, and again, interestingly, a bridge um, comes into this. So he says, having passed through the village of Brading, I turned right towards St Helens, just after the humped bridge. Suddenly, I became aware of a large multi-lit aircraft to my right. Just how far it was, I cannot be sure, but I guessed that it was halfway between the road and Bembridge Downs. And he's drawn a sort of crude map, flying very low over the swampy terrain. Its size is difficult to estimate, but it gave the impression of being immense. I felt immediately very elated, as I had always been curious about UFOs, but had never before seen anything as definite as this. And then he goes on about sort of following it and going to a place called St Helens, um, and uh, you know, and then he goes on to describe it as the object was dropping slowly and meandering along just above the distant hedges. The object had lost a lot of its brightness and appeared considerably smaller now, although it was much closer than it had been the first sighting. The bright liquid red lights appeared duller, and the white headlamps and the turquoise light were drowned out. The number of red lights were reduced to 4. So so this was kind of his first encounter. He reaches who he calls Miss B, who is his typist, and um, they both see it. He goes on to jokingly say, he'd been followed by Martian craft, um, and then he goes on to another encounter where he sees more red lights in the sky, and this happened in 1971. So he kept diary,
Mhm.
and that's how he has all these things. And Fay said he was meticulous. He kept a diary the rest of his life about this sort of stuff. And he talks about, again, moving across um, uh, treetops, and he said this time he had binoculars because because of the first encounter, he kept his binoculars with him at all times. And then in 1972, about in February 1972, when he had the next encounter, and this was center of the island again, and he calls it the Venus star. Although it wasn't Venus, again, it sort of followed him around, and uh, and he describes it as the craft toying with him, and then goes into, and I'm not going to go into the rest of these accounts. I'm saving them for my later talks and the book that I'm writing, but where they become far more insidious and darker and quite frightening. We end up with March 1972, and then December 72, and then into 73, and sort of a month or two before Fay's encounter.
Interesting. A month or two before Fay's encounter, there was a kind of ferry accident, wasn't there? I mean, thankfully no one was actually hurt, but didn't that ferry crash into the pier, and a taxi fell in with the driver and a
Yeah,
passenger, and thank goodness they managed to, I guess, thank goodness for wind up and open your doors and windows that we had then. Not sure how people would fare nowadays with those electric everything cars, but anyway, um, but yeah, that was quite a big thing to happen, and that kind of struck me that the island must have been in quite a bit of shock from that.
yeah. I don't know. Um, uh, I would suspect yes, or actually, I suspect it was probably more, because no one was actually harmed. Just this is something that happened. I don't know. I wasn't there, and I don't. You know, I was barely a year old at this point.
Yeah. But yes, his experiences, I think it must have been in the BUFORA report I was reading, that he had a sense that he was kind of being tracked,
Hmm.
how it felt
Yeah.
for him. So you've got him kind of being tracked. It's almost like since that initial experience, they've hung around, and well, we can say he's noticing them from that point on, at least we can say that. And reports this sense of being watched. And then you have this, um, his daughter having this experience in,
Mm.
in May of that year. Uh,
Hmm.
so, so yeah, can you take us from there then of these further visitations that Faye experiences?
Yeah. So she had how many? One, two, three, four more experiences after that, in over the next few years. So the first encounter after the initial encounter was in 1982, where she'd been working at a local horse stable. Again, I'm not going to say where, because it'd be quite easy to sort of work out, as the stable's still there. But she worked there. She was 16. She was earning a little bit of cash. She used to take bus to and from there, and she'd left work for the evening and was going back to the bus stop, and uh, she said that Sam sort of stepped out into view straight in front of her. This time he had something like a flute. She called it a flute with dials and buttons on it. And he could use it to draw pictures in the air. And they had a conversation, and he again spoke in the same sort of strange way. And he said, I've been keeping an eye on you. I'm very happy we are friends. Oh, we made friends. That's what he said. Sorry. And she speaks to him, and he speaks to her, but she doesn't. She doesn't have much time because she needs to get on the bus, and she's worried that her family are going to wonder where she is. And she says, I have to go, and he says, I'll see you again. He says, and this is the way she recounted it. He nodded, and he said, I'll see you again. He said, 4 more times if you want. Travel safely. And he turned and he hopped away.
Yes, can we just talk about the way he walked, actually, because this is something that came up in the first report as well, that he kind of had this strange gait, which interestingly often comes up with encounters with otherworldly beings too, that they have this very strange way of walking. It's not like human beings walk or move, but he kind of was hopping
That's right.
along.
Yeah, he kind of hops, but not like a kangaroo or anything like that. It's like, whereas your legs will bend like that, he's sort of bent like that, and
Interesting.
he hopped like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But could walk normally, and then his legs would walk normally.
So he could do both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And how did he look from the first time? So that she's 16 now, and when
Yeah.
she was 7. So this is nearly 10 years
Yeah.
later.
About 9 years. Yeah.
Later.
Mm-hmm.
And so does he look the same?
Yeah. Yeah. She said he looks the same, um, uh, except his clothes are um, uh, are less mangled, but he looks the same. And she says, what did she say? Um, she asked him. She says, uh, and he said to her, things are fixed now, and I don't have to hide or forage. He said to her, but yeah, he said, same, but his clothes were less tattered, the same strange face.
So that's from 1973 to 1982. And he's saying things are fixed now. Interesting.
Yeah.
Did he emerge near water again? Did water play a part anywhere in this again?
Uh, Heavily wooded area, but you're never far from water and marshland on the
Yeah,
island.
right. Only water does play a big part in some of the encounters that we hear about.
Mm.
Okay, and was she pleased to see him when he arrived on that occasion? Was she quite shocked or?
I think she was surprised,
Yeah.
but she wasn't scared or anything like that. She was more concerned about getting home, and that's what I mean by this kind of matter of fact.
Mm.
That you'd think that if this thing turned out, you'd be, but she was like, yeah, uh,
Yeah.
unfortunately I had to go, and he was kind of cool with that as well. So
Yes, I mean, but this is what I mean about the sense of recognition. When I say familiarity, I guess what I mean is recognition, because from the moment that she kind of meets this person, because the little boy, he was frightened, wasn't he?
Hmm.
But she wasn't. And
No.
and you could say, oh well, she's grown up in a household where her dad is open to these things. And this is something we look at in our stories as well, is that, what's going on here? Is it that there's something within the structure of a person through a lineage that means that we are somehow closer to these worlds? Or is it that the environment in which you're growing up in is so open that you are allowed to kind of be open to these experiences? So, and we don't know which the two is, but, and there could be another explanation, but did you get a sense, or did she talk about a sense of recognition with him in any way?
She just spoke about him like he's a friend, like just another person.
Mm.
So the way I equate it is, you know, um, if you grow up with someone if you grew up with Taylor Swift or Michael Jackson or um, King Charles, right? They are your friends, and you bumped into him, you'd be like, "All right, how you doing?" You know, wouldn't you?
Mm.
And that's how she spoke about. You know, everyone else around you would be like, "Oh my God, you know, the king? Oh yeah, we went to school together. He was all right." You know, you don't get phased about people that you're friends with,
Mhm. Yeah,
whereas people around you would be like, "Whoa." And that's kind of how she spoke about it.
yeah,
As I said, just matter of factly, like a friend, but with affection.
yeah. And did that encounter coincide with with her dad's? No, that didn't. Okay.
No, no.
So that's 1982. So then the next time she sees him.
1983, so a year later.
Mm.
She's 17 at this stage. She's uh, in there's a corner of a park um, where there were, sort of concrete benches in a sort of a horseshoe shape. And they were all sort of doing what teenagers do, they were sort of drinking cheap cider and smoking cigarettes and whatever else. This is the early 80s. Um, but she maintains that she hadn't had anything to drink.
Mhm.
And and she said, basically he sort of rocks up in the middle of this thing,
Yeah.
and everything kind of changes. But she's still in the same place, but everything is shifted and changed. And there, it's almost like she's in his world now, and she can see other people, other creatures or entities or whatever you want to call them, like him walking around. They she describes it as them chattering.
Mm.
Um, and uh, and this time in sort of 1983, 84, 85, we're in the middle of Cold War, right? Things are looking pretty rough.
Mm.
Um, things are really heating up, and she said that Sam spoke to her about a bunch of things that were going to happen or may happen, wouldn't happen. He said, "The world will not end in your lifetime." He said, "There will be no nuclear war, and Europe will not be split for long," he says. Um, and uh, and then he added, "This is the second time I told you there will be four more if you wish it." And she asked, um, uh, you know, why? And he didn't say anything to her. Um, and he showed her things, and she saw doorways to different things.
Yeah.
Um, and then the encounter ended, and she's back where she was, and she said her friends were sort of, you know, carrying on, and she said, "Oh, how long was I gone?" And they all sort of laughed at her and accused her of being a weirdo and having too much to drink, or being high or whatever. And but she maintained she was completely sober. Um, and as far as she could tell, there was no real loss of time. So it feels like time moves differently during these encounters. And the way I interpret it is that we can't think of these things as a linear thing. We experience things linearly, but I don't necessarily think Sam does, or these creatures do. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating. But just the way that she spoke.
Yeah. It seems to be like that, that these worlds, when people, you know, enter them, that it's in the folklore, but it's also in the experiences that people report that they have lost time. And of course, it's the same with UFO or
Mm,
abduction type experiences. Um, what's also really interesting about that is the description of the turning from one reality to the next. And I don't know if you've heard of the Oz factor, what Jenny Randall's described as the Oz factor, which of course refers to the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy, moves from one world to another.
amazing.
And a lot of people talk about these sorts of phenomena, both in, as I say, UFO, sort of alien visitation type experiences, and fairy encounter experiences, where something shifts. So sounds often are kind of buzzing or other sounds. You will get a shift in the tone or the color of your
Mm,
surroundings. You'll get, and as she mentioned, a glimmering at some point. There's this kind of glimmer, shimmer and buzz. That might have been one of her later encounters, I think. Or was that
mm.
this encounter? Perhaps it was, and
This one, yeah, she talks about it as the things changed, colors changed. She heard a buzzing and things sort of. But it was like someone had just put a filter over things, and you know. So yeah, perception changes, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So this is really part and parcel of the kinds of experiences people have when they enter, the fairy realm. As and the previous experience, with him playing a whistle, that is really strange. And the fact that it can make these patterns, and again, these kind of psychedelic patterns.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the way Fay described them is the way he made the these images were reminiscent of what was in the book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Very interesting because you've got kind of we were talking about DMT experiences earlier, and if you look at the research that Dr. Rick Strassman did, one of the things that comes up is that people do see kind of clown-like figures that come along and they interact with the people that are having those experiences. She doesn't refer to him as a clown.
Mm.
So, I don't know about that, but there's some kind of performative element to it, that he's coming,
Mm.
he's doing this, and which is exactly what happens in those experiences. And in those experiences, they will aid the experiencer in some way, in the same way that fairies do. This is
Yeah,
archetype, it's the trickster archetype. Um, that they will something about the way that they interact with that person that's having the experience or give them information or lead them in a certain way or inspire them in a certain way has then some effect on their lives afterwards. And the showing of um, he was kind of showing her things about the world, I believe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Showing her, showing her things that she couldn't describe. She couldn't remember.
Yeah.
But I get the feeling that he showed it to her to calm her and make her realize that actually things are going to be okay,
Yeah.
at least for now.
At least for now. I mean, again, one of the people that I spoke to recently, it was an encounter in South Wales. I'll send this to you afterwards. This man, he, as a child, had wandered he was camping with his family, and at one point he wanders from the beach, again near water, into the forest, which is next to the beach, and he comes into contact with these two beings that, for all the descriptions that are given, look a bit like moomins, although he wasn't really kind of aware of moomins. And they like that this Sam, these beings showed him in various rooms. They showed him different kind of contraptions that were meant to represent the earth and talk to him about the fact that human beings really need to take better care of the earth. So it's really reminiscent of that when I heard the showing and the trying to get some kind of message across to her, and the
Mm.
opening into these doorways, very similar sorts of experiences. Really interesting.
Yeah, the thing that struck me is, you hear these sorts of things and these predictions and messages they give, which is a lot of them tend to be very much for the entire world, but in this case, these are very personal. All these experiences are directed at Faye, their personal revelation for her, not for anyone else. Not to, we need to protect the earth. We need to, we're going the wrong. These are bits for her. Do you see what I mean? This is a very personal, um, personal experiences. That's what it feels like to me.
Did she change her view on the world in any way, or did she? And you don't answer this if it reveals anything about anything personal about Faye, because I wouldn't want to jeopardize her anonymity at all. But it left me wondering, and this is a question I would ask my guests, is, what did they go on to do afterwards? Did they go on to do something that aided the world in some way?
Uh, she went off and had a normal life.
Okay.
She got married and moved away and went to the mainland and had children and yeah, just lived her life. And that's what I was saying. She took. There's been nothing. She's not tried to capitalize on any of this. It's been a very personal thing, as far as I can see.
Mm. Thank you. So what next then? So she
So
did.
she had another experience in 1984. So another next year, and this was a very quick encounter where she was going to see her then boyfriend, and there was a cut through some alleyways. I'm not going to go into, not going to say where it is because there's some details in here that you could just cross reference. But and as she was taking the cross through, and then she said she decided that actually I'm not going to go that way. I'm going to go the long way. She'd already started, and she turned around and walked back. And as she walked back, Sam walked from round the corner. But this time he's different. So this time she describes him as looking more normal. I mean, that's her words, more normal. and walking. And he's very urgent, and he says, I don't have much time. I'm using up one of my visits, he says to her. So indicating that actually this wasn't one of his official visits, or um, and he sort of says, "I know where you're going to see the boy. You shouldn't," is what he says, and then he said, "Turn around, just go home. That's all, please." And then he walks off, and she does what he says. She turns around. She doesn't go see her boyfriend. And then it turns out later that night, her boyfriend with a bunch of other lads tried to rob an establishment, and they get caught by the police. And she never saw him again. But never saw her boyfriend again. She cut all ties. But yeah, so it was a warning to sort of save her from whatever was about to go down. So it was a very different and very matter of fact, and it stood out to me for being very different to all the other experiences. Because this one is, although Sam is being almost obtuse, or withholding, probably better term. It's very direct, and there was nothing in it other than he turns up, delivers his message, and then takes off. Which was very different to what has happened before.
Almost like it's in haste.
Yeah. So I was going to turn my light on because it's starting to get a bit dark in here. Yeah.
Yeah, he arrives and gets the message across and then heads off.
And then heads off. Yeah.
And was this at what point was so what was he wearing also in this experience?
Let me have a look. Really good question. I should know this off the top of my head, shouldn't I?
Well, there's so much to it, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah. His appearance startled her. This time, more than before. His tall figure, slightly stooped, still looked out of place. He was dressed more normally, and he didn't appear to have the alabaster complexion. He appeared more human, in inverted commas, and his mannerisms and speech patterns were more like a normal person. In her words, he seemed more normal.
I love that because I mean, for my own reasons, that it just feels like these times, the interest in kind of otherworldly beings, whether that be, Sasquatch, whether that be um, fairy beings or other kinds of, cryptids, the interest is really peak at the moment. And I think that there's something about the kind of vagueness of, well, he's definitely other when he first comes on the scene, and then
Mm.
slowly he's sort of almost it's like the next stop he might actually pass for a human being, and
Yeah.
that we walk past people, and it's true, we walk past people and they look like human beings, although there's always something a little bit off that kind of catches
Mm.
out in these encounters, but that he's becoming, to look like one of us, or be able to behave more like one of us with his walking. And yeah. At which point did she talk about this scent of earth and leaves? Was that the 1983?
That is,
Happened
yeah, it is the one where she's with her friends. Yeah.
when she was with her friends. And is this when she talks about him, sort of language without meaning, with the words that really kind of jumped out at me?
Let me see. So I've got so much.
Yeah.
Uh, there's so much information, and once I did my talk, I sort of had to empty out my brain so I could fit other stuff in. Um, so and that's why I've taken notes and written all this stuff down. Otherwise, I just won't remember all the details. Yeah, so I think that, are you talking about the chattering?
The chattering, yeah, could you describe that, please?
Let me find it.
It's
Sorry.
not like the kind of
Um,
high-pitched chattering that we sometimes hear from
uh,
teams. It was a kind of muffled or behind a,
so she says there were others, figures that looked like him, tall, strange, difficult to focus on. Some some wore clothing like his, odd patchwork garments stitched from unplaceable fabrics. Others shimmered slightly, like heat seen through glass. They did not speak, but they chattered, not in English, not even in a sound exactly. It was like voices heard through a pane of thick water, language without meaning, a murmuring presence. That's how she described it, a murmuring presence.
wow. Yeah, it's really conjures up a sense of how, you know, how incredible that must have been.
Mm,
And so,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry, go on.
So you carry on. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say that, it really sort of brings up, a feeling of the other,
Yeah,
you know.
it really does. So then the next experience that she has is kind of the last one to date.
That's right. Yeah, that was 1989. So she's 24. And she'd she was newly married, and they were to leave the next morning on their honeymoon and start their new life together, really. And she was staying. They were staying at friends' place, and she'd gone for a walk. And I always found this quite interesting because um, she talks about how there had been a a fish pond, or a fishing pond that had been filled in, and it always struck me as that detail is very strange in that it has no bearing on the rest of the story, but she threw that in. And so she went on this walk through sort of hedgerow, and she says that afternoon Fay took a walk by herself, as she often did to clear her mind. She followed a lonely footpath, still damp from the morning mist, lined with rusting fences and tired trees. And there, quite suddenly, it stood, a hut, not like any she'd seen before. It looked, she said, almost like an old intercity express train, long, white, and oddly sleek. The roof was corrugated iron, slightly bowed. The whole structure seemed out of place, as though dropped into the landscape from a world that didn't quite match. Sam was waiting. He stood outside the hut, exactly as she remembered, his face painted, calm, his clothing still strange as ever, but this time there was something different about his posture. He greeted her without surprise. "Come in for tea," he said. She followed. Inside it was quiet and dry. There was light, but not from any sources she could identify. It simply was. There was a table, two chairs, a strange device like a kettle, but not a kettle, and cups made of a soft material like porcelain, but subtly pliable in her fingers. They sat. He poured the tea. It smelt of herbs she couldn't name. It was comforting and sweet. They spoke for a while, though, as with previous encounters, much of what he said faded quickly from memory. Not by choice, just a soft forgetting, like waking from a vivid dream and losing it between heartbeats. But before things, but some things stayed. He told her the Berlin Wall would fall. So this was before. So she said the Berlin Wall will fail. She remembered thinking that was impossible. And then he said, "This is the last time you'll see me until the end." She asked him where he was from. He paused and said, "From this place, but different." That was all. There was no explanation. Eventually, she rose. He stood with her. They stepped outside. So this time they're sort of walking through doors or just walking out. And he raised his hand in the same slow waving motion that he'd done before and waved. She waved back and she turned and she looked again and the hut was gone. It wasn't hidden, it was just gone. And that was it. And she never saw Sam again.
I mean, there's so much there. Obviously, the kind of political, well, not the political, but the work, the message of the, the world situation that he handed to her,
Mm,
suggesting he has some kind of overview or is able to see, a different perspective of whether that is time or something else than we do. And the what she notices in there, the pliable kind of cups, sounds as if, and I don't know, but it makes you think of some kind of substance that we're not yet aware of.
mm.
And this time, how did he look?
Why, he was back with the face paint, but his clothes were neat and tidy and, you know, but he
Yeah.
was back to looking the way that he looked. And his speech patterns were far more fluid or natural than, so there seems to be this progression with his speech patterns.
Yeah. But the appearance with the face and even the kind of it mirrors the hut and his appearance in the first meeting where they meet
Mm,
on Scrubland. Um, and he obviously the mentioning that he's going to see her, at the end. And I know this is something
mm,
discussed with on the AP Strange podcast as well. This idea of the end, is that the end of this world or the end of her life? And did
I
she
mean, she
get
she
what?
seems to feel that it was, the end of her life is when, he'll be there at the end.
Yeah. Again, you know, I work with the idea that when we do pass over, I experienced this myself when my dad passed over actually, is that you have people on the other side that are waiting for you to greet you. And this is where I
Mm,
kind of always come back to this sense of the familial. Is there something about their lineage, their family that, you know, is it some kind of ancestral thing? Is it something otherworldly that is somehow tied to the family where, you know, description after description of people that have died and come back say that when they pass over, they are greeted by their loved ones. They are there, they are held
mm.
and welcomed. And when I heard this, I that's what it made me think of. It just made me think of, well, I'll be there for you. I'll see you at the end. I'll be waiting on the other side. Um, rather than that he'll appear just before she passes, which could be another, that could be like that as well. But did she feel quite comforted by that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, she seemed very, very at ease with it all, and very, uh, I get the sense that she felt, you know, almost like a guardian angel type situation. Um, so I think yes would be, the easy answer, or the quick answer.
Mm. What do you feel about that? I mean, how do you feel having sat with this woman who has such an extraordinary story to tell? How does it make you feel?
Oh, immensely honored that I was able to have this conversation, and you know, speaking with her a few other times since then. So I made her aware that I was doing these talks, and so forth. Um, and have given her an open invitation to every single one of them if she wishes to come along. Um, and but yeah, immensely honored, and extremely, uh, I guess, for want of a better word, blessed that I have this opportunity.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, for someone to take you into their trust like that, um, is something very special.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing it.
No, my pleasure.
I've
Yeah,
kept you quite a while, so I do really appreciate your time. Um,
no problem.
and so your initial talk was in the Isle of Wight. You've got another
Hmm.
one coming up. I believe a future one may be recorded, or is it the one that's coming up that's going to be
The
recorded?
one that's coming up is being recorded. Yeah,
Excellent.
and then I have a second, a follow up talk in, October, October, November, something like that, uh, where I speak about some of the other stuff. I go into in far more detail about, her father's encounters, um, uh, actually, recounting his words, in greater depth, um, and also go into greater depth with, some other encounters, people who have claimed to have met, similar beings as Sam, a couple of people from the island who claim to have had similar experiences, not identical but similar. Um, and yeah, so it's very much a follow up conversation.
I can't wait for this. When is your next when's your next talk then, your next presentation
My next presentation, let me get the dates. Let me check
recorded?
my diary. 1 second. Uh,
It's funny that, this all happens on an island because I know in Jersey there the whole island's only 9 by 5, but it's so full of dolmens, these Neolithic sacred sites that I mean I've experienced things near these dolmens, and in these dolmens, in fact, as other people do all over the world. And the Isle of Wight also has Neolithic structures, and it
mm,
escaped my notice that apparently the original encounter took place near an ancient crossroads, or is this the same one that was excavated and they found a kind of road beneath or something? Was that something different?
uh, there, there are. are two places
Oh,
like that, but this one is an ancient trackway,
yeah.
so an ancient crossroads, yeah, where they have found evidence that sort of that go back to the Neolithic period. So it's an ancient trackway.
Yeah, you've got, the liminality of that as well, crossroads being these powerful places, and even other liminal aspects like her going off to get married and she sees him, he comes the night before,
Mm,
these are the points in our lives where we are crossing thresholds. Um, you know,
yeah, exactly.
all these little pointers all the way through. So I'm hooked. Can't wait for the next talk. So yes, so the next live
So
presentation,
the next one is the 9th of August.
9th
So
of August.
that's
Great.
uh, um, that's a a, the same talk that I did a month ago, and the second talk is on the 1st of November,
Okay.
which is the follow up one.
And I will link to these. So if you want to send me the links afterwards, I will link these up. Um, is the 9th of August, is that open to anybody like that want to attend in person?
Yes, yeah. They're ticketed events.
Yeah.
All the money's going to uh, the charity that runs. Uh, um, it's at a fort,
Okay.
so all the sort of all the profits go to that. But yeah, it's open to anyone that wants to come along. Last time we had people from all around the country who came along, Scotland, from Brighton, someone from Northern Ireland.
Oh,
So
well, I'm
yeah.
I'm sure you're going to get people from all over turning up to this next one because it's got so much interest. Just lastly, her children, have they
Mhm.
had interesting experiences too? Has this kind of come down the line?
I we didn't talk about her children. It was kind of off limits. It was very much talking about her.
Mm, mm.
Um, you know, uh, her child that contacted me. Um, we didn't really speak about that. If they ever decide to reach out and speak to me, I'll let you know. But so far, no, nothing.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks so much again, Paul. And if I can make it to that talk, I will. And but otherwise, I very much look forward to watching online and sharing with people on the podcast here. What's the best place for people to contact you?
Uh, on Blue Sky, I use Blue Sky um, or email. And it's either or really, or phone me if they want to. But yeah, generally Blue Sky is probably the best
Yeah,
place to contact me.
I think you would probably end up with loads of phone calls otherwise.
Well, yeah,
I hope you get more people contacting you to let you know what they experience too. So, yeah,
yeah, it's fascinating stuff. It really is.
really is. I think this is just the beginning of the story in some ways because it just seems to have opened out, and let's see where this goes. So, all right, all the
Mm.
best then, and
Okay, thank you.
come back and have a chat when after you've done the Mark two of the invest.
Yeah, anytime. Just let me know, and I'm happy to come and talk about it.
Wonderful. Thanks very much then. Take care.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening and watching. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider joining us on Patreon for dozens more episodes of unreleased bonus content, monthly online events, and a private chat. We are a warm, supportive community, and it really helps to support the project. Find us on patreon.com/The Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast.